is. What's up, everybody? It's Panthers game day, man. How sick is that? Like, how great is this feeling right now? Think about it. We're about to see the starters, or at least some of them. We'll get into the inactives and all that mess. But we got a Panthers game day, man, and we're gonna see Bryce Young. We're gonna see some of the offensive line. We're gonna see receivers. We're gonna see the defenders that we've been hearing about. We've got a lot of fun things to look forward to, at least for a series or two today. And then when you get past that, even right, we've still got some serious competition going on at the bottom of this roster. I think in the middle of this roster. You want to talk about us being one of the worst teams in the league? Well, that means that there's a lot of turnover possible at the bottom and middle of our roster fighting for depth. I got a buddy here today that is going to come on with me, and we're going to talk about everything that's going on. But before I bring him up, I want to get off my little bit of bars here on the stuff that came out today, right? Or I don't even know that came out today. I saw a post this morning. I believe it's from Conway. Shout out Conway. It was Bill Simmons and Steven Ruiz, right? And they were talking about Bryce Young, and Steven Ruiz, who is a self-proclaimed Panthers fan, said that he believes that Bryce Young will be benched this year. That's his hot take, right? Look, you don't have to love Bryce Young, man. You don't have to. He had one of the historically worst rookie seasons for a quarterback. Skepticism, doubt, all of those things, 1,000% fair. I don't knock anyone that has doubt about it. Saying that you think he's going to be benched, I think is a little bit premature, especially for a guy who had Bryce Young ranked as his number 2 quarterback prospect behind Anthony Richardson. Now, here's the deal about that too, right? The reason that he said Bryce Young was behind Anthony Richardson was if not for the injury concerns about Bryce Young. Hold on a second. Now, think about that one more time. Listen to me when I say it again. If not for the injury concerns for Bryce Young, he would have challenged for his number 1 ranking quarterback prospect coming out of that draft class. Bryce Young missed what? A game? 2 games in his 2-year career at Alabama? How many games did Anthony Richardson miss in Florida? How many serious injuries did he deal with? I'm not knocking Anthony Richardson's talent level. Anthony Richardson's talented as hell. And he's 6'5", 250 pounds, can jump out of the arena, laser rocket arm. I mean, you talk about Napoleon Dynamite's uncle throwing something over a mountain. I think Anthony Richardson could throw the mountain. You know what I mean? Like, this is a strong dude. This is a physical specimen. But to sit there and say that it was the injury concerns and then say, but I don't see a single trait with Bryce Young. I don't see it. He didn't show anything. Bill Simmons wasn't happy that he didn't see the lightning speed that he saw at Alabama. The dual threat quarterback, right? The Michael Vick, the Lamar Jackson. Like, what are we talking about, dude? He was never lightning fast. He was creative. He knew when to use his legs. He extended plays. And guess what? He did it in the NFL too. If you say that you never saw it, it's because you weren't watching the football games. The Carolina Panthers weren't a team that I enjoyed watching, and I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, but I watched all the games. I saw all of it. Bryce Young used his legs, and they were probably one of his best weapons last season because his actual weapons didn't do their jobs for the most part. That's my bars. I just wanted to get my rant off real quick, and now we're going to talk a little bit about preseason. I'll see if this guy has a little bit of input about that too. Without a little bit of a delay, let's bring up my homie, Jared Feinberg. What's up, Jared, man? How are you?
Hey, man. I'm doing good. Just watching Florida State, Georgia Tech right now.
Yeah, that's right, man. Football's back, huh?
8-7 ball game. Georgia Tech just stormed downfield to answer Florida State's touchdown 2-point conversion. So football is back. I'll be split screening today. I'll have Florida State and Georgia Tech on one laptop, and then of course the Panthers game on television screen.
On the big screen, right? That gets your full attention.
Yes.
Now, absolutely. Look, before we get into the Panthers, man, we haven't been on a stream together since you had some news announced. And last night, the Jacksonville Jaguars played a preseason football game. And that's pertinent for you because you are now covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for the Jaguars Wire, as well as covering the Carolina Panthers in a different mode than you had. You are now covering them as a staff writer for the Carolina Panthers Wire as well. So first, man, congratulations, dude. That's awesome. You're going to crush it.
I appreciate it.
What are you looking for today, man, with this Carolina Panthers offense coming out, right? We're going to get a little bit of the starters. We saw the inactives. The big names there are Austin Corbett, and Damian Lewis are probably the two names on offense that would stand out the most to everybody that isn't playing. Tommy Tremble, I think, is still kind of interesting, although, there was reports during practice last week. He had general soreness expected, but he did kind of reach for that hamstring at one point and gingerly walk back to a huddle. I like taking it easy here, right? I like kind of practicing a little bit of caution there with that. What are your thoughts about Austin Corbett not playing? Do we know anything about that at all?
No. Well, actually, yes. So Austin Corbett, I believe, for the same reasons that Damian Lewis is out, both of them are out for personal reasons. Corbett's healthy, Lewis is healthy, but they're out for personal reasons. They did not make the trip to Buffalo, so expect potentially Andrew Rhyme at center to start the game, or even Brady Christensen at center.
Because Cade Mays is out as well, right?
Yeah, and you'll likely see Chandler Zavala at left guard. So that's your expected lineup potentially.
Okay.
Here in about, what time is it? In about 30 minutes. So
yeah,
that's basically the starting offensive line for today. And
sure.
I want to make this point real quick.
Yeah.
Just because if the offensive line looks subpar again today, I'm not going to overreact, more so just because Corbett and Lewis are not playing today. But at the same time, it may show a look of like the depth on the team may not be as great, especially with Buffalo's starters not even playing today. You'll see second and third team players from Buffalo playing today. No starters from them, as Sean McDermott noted, I believe, at the beginning of the week. So that's basically what you're going to get from Buffalo. Is their second and third team guys. Carolina's basically doing their dress rehearsal game for most of their starters.
Yeah.
Guys like Bryce Young, Akeem Ekwonu, all the receivers, etc. So I'm excited to see just a little bit of some playing time for these guys, for the starters, for Bryce to kind of just get some game reps in and then get ready for week one.
And so some of the some of the conversation that I saw, man. First, shout out Rashad from PMP. They're terrific. But he made a post last night and he was saying something about it's a lose-lose in a way. Is the way that he's looking at it, because if the offense comes out, the first team offense comes out, and they play really well, right? The reaction will be they're playing against depth players or playing against second stringers or reserves. If they come out and they struggle, that's when the fire alarm really sounds, right? Because then they're struggling against depth players, guys that are fighting for roster positions, guys that aren't starting on Sunday for the Buffalo Bills. My feeling on that is that I get it, right? And I don't think that he's wrong for that being like the consensus of how most people will react to everything. For me personally, Jared, and I'd love your opinion on this, if this first team offense comes out and, first team removed without the center and guard, if they come out and they move the football and they look confident and comfortable in the system, if there's no pre-snap communication issues, because really, man, that's what I'm looking for here, right? Is the more procedural aspects of this. Dave Canales is putting on that headset for the very first time and communicating with Bryce Young for the very first time in a game setting. It's the first time. Never happened before. We saw last year there was a lot of pre-snap issues for Bryce Young and the offense. They would get up there. They would have no time to call out protections. They would have no time for pre-snap adjustments. Now, look, in the preseason, you're not going to see exotic looks, right? You're not going to see crazy things that you're going to have to spend a lot of time adjusting or calling out and those kinds of things. But you still want to see it from a procedural standpoint, getting to the line with time to do those things. So that's kind of where I'm starting. From there, I'm looking at how comfortable does Bryce Young look executing the offense, right? That 2.7 seconds time to throw. I want to see that. I want to see the emphasis on that. I want to see the physicality from the offensive line. That's the mentality that we've been told all offseason, right? And all preseason. They want to come out and they want to be grinders, dude. They want to run over people. They want to maul people. That's what I'm looking for, man. Does that seem kind of in line of what fans should be paying attention to most today?
Yeah, a little bit. I think you want to see a little bit of what they've been working on in practice, what they've been working on in training camp, getting that playbook down. I mean, they've said for probably a couple of weeks they've already gotten most of the playbook down. They're already done with the install,
right?
Yeah, so they're done with that. They're just working on going through the motions of play calling, working on different types of plays, etc.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to see how that communication looks. It might look a little different today just because Austin Corbett is not playing today, nor is Damian Lewis. So there could be some inconsistencies. But I think the biggest thing is how does this system look? There's going to be flashes of what the system could be. We've seen flashes of it over the last couple of weeks where I think this system is going to look a little bit more efficient. It's looked a lot more efficient, especially in practice. And Mike K has pointed this out too from the Charlotte.
They've been stacking them, right?
It's this offense looks in theory very efficient, and I'm excited about that. What could become an issue is, of course, if pressure's allowed consistently, but it comes from the interior. Now, I get it. It's preseason. Some of the starters aren't playing. It is what it is. But I will heed caution in terms of if you're seeing pressure like this from your second team, then you may have issues going forward. That depth is still likely an issue. Thankfully, the Panthers do have the number one waiver priority once cuts and waivers begin next week, I believe on Tuesday. So the Panthers are going to have a ton of options, especially once a ton of players are going to be off the board. I saw someone mention Jackson Carman as a potential option. I'm all the way out on Jackson Carman.
Please no,
the
man.
ties with Clemson and being close and all that. Clemson fans, if you're watching this, Jackson Carman, no way. I do not want someone who is just not been great at football the last few years.
Hey, look, if there's a huge desire for bringing in a Clemson player that may be a fringe cut player for somebody else, Will Putnam, the center for the Las Vegas Raiders, that's a guy that I've kind of had my eye on. He had a couple of nice series last night. I was up late watching the game after watching a movie, and Putnam, man, from the reports too, he's been nasty in camp. He's got that Raider mentality, which sounds a lot like a dog in a way, right? So that could make some sense. You talk about getting some depth. I liked him coming out of Clemson. So if you're a Clemson fan, maybe there's where you can scratch that itch. But I'm with you on Jackson Carman, man. I'm cool on that. I do think that we'll get a look today a little bit with the Bills. They're a relatively talented roster, and when you talk about them as an NFL team, they're ahead of us, right? As far as where they are developmentally and where they are with experience and success. So from a logistical standpoint, their bottom of the roster should be better than our bottom of the roster. So when we see a lot of their depth players today and we get a firsthand look at them, it might be of interest to Dan Morgan, who has a withstanding relationship with Brandon Beane, right? Who has all of these kind of ties, and they've already kind of done a little bit of work with each other with the trades. So this may be a thing that you may want to watch some of these depth players. It may not be turn the TV off after the first two series with the starters play or whatever it is. Maybe you take a look at it, right? Real quick, before we get anything else, let me check out these comments because that is the whole purpose of going live, right? I'm really bad at it. This is my second time, but shout out to Kilroy first, man. He says, love the show. Keep it going. Thank you, Kilroy. Appreciate you, man. Doug, how are you, man? Says, don't forget about Blackshear as well. Raheem Blackshear, dude, that's a good point. And, he's been an interesting name for me that he has been inactive for all of the preseason games. They must feel very good and comfortable about his standing on this roster. And now that's probably from the kick return game, or is there something else going on that maybe he's not 100% healthy and that hasn't been entirely disclosed? Because it seems strange to me that a guy who at best is going to be running back 4, right? Once Jonathan Brooks is healthy from an offensive standpoint, you're talking about running back 4 unless Miles Sanders isn't on the roster anymore. There's a couple of ifs there, but he hasn't played. So not getting any preseason action either says they're very secure with his roster standing, or there's something else going on and they want to get a look at everybody else to find out. What is your read on that?
It's hard to tell, but from my understanding is that Mike Boone has really stood out in training camp as well as this summer. And that tells me a lot of where they stand with him and potentially where
he's got some kick return ability too, right? We've seen him in camp, and I believe preseason he's taken a couple of returns. I'd have to look back at that. But in camp, I know that he's definitely been running with the return team.
He has. And with Blackshear not getting a ton of practice reps, it's just it feels off to me that why he's not getting a ton of or Blackshear not getting a ton of reps in practice,
Yeah.
or even missing practice,
Yep.
some, or not even being active for today's game.
Right.
In my opinion, that tells me that Blackshear might be on the outside looking in. I don't
Mm.
think he makes the roster. I think it's going to be Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and Mike Boone's your top 3 running backs, with Brooks on the NFI.
Yeah,
So
because he wasn't hurt in an
right.
NFL game, and that distinction is important too. He's not going on the PUP list. The NFI would be where he is, which you can come off of at any point. There is no
Mhm.
you have to wait 4 or 6 games. You could come off whenever you're ready to go, and they could activate him tomorrow after this game. You know what I mean? They could do whatever they want to with that, and it allows that they don't have to miss him for 4 weeks. He could play in week 2 or week 3, or start getting practice time in week 2 or week 3. I wouldn't expect him to contribute very early like that. But I think you could see him start getting familiar if he's ramping up that activity level.
Yeah. And, Blackshear loved what he was as a player the last couple of years, like being more
Mm-hmm.
that change of pace back at
Mm-hmm.
times. He's showing a little bit of explosiveness, some shiftiness as a runner as well, so showing that ability to be a pass catcher out of the backfield. It's concerning that he hasn't been getting a ton of reps, and
Right.
I'm leaning towards this kind of the same situation with Amir Smith-Marset. He has that punt return ability. He is probably their true quote unquote burner,
Right.
but what we haven't seen much of him this preseason. And that
Yeah.
concerns me a little bit. Maybe it's just me kind of overthinking it overall, but
No, I think you got some merit to that, man. You want to see a flash from a guy like that who was, acquired at the end of the preseason last year from the Kansas City Chiefs, and their wide receiver room wasn't particularly deep, right? So if he was a standout and they really believed in him, maybe they would have kept him on the roster. But what they did is kind of similar to what we did with Michael Barrett, in my opinion. We looked at it and said, from a positional standpoint, I don't think he's going to make this roster. Like, I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve to be on a 53 somewhere else, but on ours, with our depth at that position, I don't think it works. So let's see if we could get something in return, as opposed to having it as just a corresponding move when we release him, right?
right.
Now, the one thing, back to the chat real quick. Sorry, I just remembered again. Pyromaster, what's good, fellas? What's up, Pyro? Oz, man, what's up, Oz? How you doing, man? Panthers game day. You guys jacked up? Tahid, what's up, boys? What's up, Tahid? So Jared, the other thing that I wanted to ask about is that when we look at the depth of the roster, and we look at positional battles, right? Jatavion Sanders has got to be making Dave Canales and his coaching staff think really hard about getting rid of Ian Thomas, because I think Tommy Tremble is there, right? Tommy Tremble seems like he's got the support of the organization, and he's the best blocker on the team. I know that's Ian Thomas's calling card, but Tremble, in my opinion, has surpassed him in that regard. From an athletic standpoint, he's a little bit quicker to his spots. He's more physical. I think he reaches that second level a lot better than Ian Thomas does as well. And so if you look at a 12 personnel formation, Jatavion Sanders and Tommy Tremble is kind of interesting to me. Do you think that there's a way that if Jatavion shows out again today, that could kind of, well, let me put it this way. Jordan Matthews or Ian Thomas would be the two that you're debating between, correct? Where would you lean based off of what we've seen in camp and the way they've talked about them? Jordan Matthews seems like he's got a lot of support as well. So do you get the feeling that Ian Thomas may be finally on that cusp of getting cut?
I am leaning Jordan Matthews to make the roster over Ian Thomas. And, for a lot of Panther fans that, 6 years ago, there were expectations that Ian Thomas, he was going to be the successor to Greg Olsen. 6 years later, he has yet to reach that potential or come anywhere close to that, nor reach any of that yardage total. He may have had, I think his career yardage total would be good enough for like 2 of Greg Olsen's best seasons. So just to kind of put into perspective, Ian Thomas hasn't been great. He had a great start to the summer, a couple of great practices. And
they liked him, right? Like they spoke kind of glowingly of him at the beginning.
Dave Canales had a lot of great things to say about Ian Thomas. And maybe that shows that, hey, he could still make the roster.
Yeah.
But the way that Jatavion Sanders has shown out, the way that Jordan Matthews has shown out, I think it shows that they like what they have right now. And I think this is a sign that Ian Thomas's time in Carolina is finally coming to an end.
You know what JT Sanders has done so well, and I hope I didn't cut you off there if you were finishing that point. What JT Sanders has done so well, in my opinion, is he's done exactly what you want from a rookie, where he kind of did the work that they were asking him to do in camp and in practice, right? He didn't fuss about not being number one in the depth chart. He didn't complain about not getting the action. He took number 85 and tried to earn his 0, right? He did everything that you want at that standpoint. But when the opportunity did present itself, he took it, man. Like, there was no doubt that he was starting to excel when he got more opportunities. People watched what he did in camp as a receiving threat, as a guy that can really bust a seam, man. And that's the thing. He can get behind that second layer of defense, that second level of defense, and he can make you pay because he's got strong hands. He's going to make the catch. Now, the rack ability after catching it, that's where it's still, we're still going to find that out about him. He's a good athlete. I don't think he's an elite athlete. I don't think that he's a burner by any means, but he is a bulldozer. We saw him run over a couple of people. His blocking, I think, has improved. I think that's been better than I anticipated it being, especially if you look at the progress from game 1 in the preseason, where I thought he looked like he had a little bit of rookie jitters and kind of was thinking a little bit. The same with Trevin Wallace, if you want to be completely honest. I think both of them looked like rookies in their very first NFL action. But once they have both settled in, man, they look like they are promising draft picks that we got in the 3rd and 4th rounds. What a gigantic development that would be for the Carolina Panthers, who have a history of missing on everything after the first.
It's encouraging to see a lot of these later round draft picks like starting looking to make an impact this year. When was the last time we've seen this, or any Panther fans have seen this? Seeing a 4th round pick like Jadavian Sanders, who could have gone in day 2 of the draft.
Yeah.
And was right there for the Panthers, taking, of course, at the start of the 4th round. Sanders is the most talented tight end on the roster. And that says a lot about him as well as his future prospects on the team.
And it does say a little bit about the tight end room too, right? It does say a little bit about what we have already.
Right. And that's not to say Tommy Tremble isn't talented. I think Tommy Tremble has plenty of athleticism. He's a great athlete and a great blocker, but we haven't seen that production as a receiver. He did, I believe he led the team in receiving touchdowns last year, which is impressive. So I would like to see a little bit more
think about that.
Right. But seeing Tommy Tremble and Jadavian Sanders, you have that blocker, then you have that receiver. I think you're going to see a lot more 12 personnel sets. And I think we've seen flashes of that throughout the preseason and training camp.
Yes.
So with Sanders, it wouldn't be surprising if he's starting by the end of the year, if he is the number 1 tight end on this roster or on this or on the depth chart. So you could see the Panthers having Xavier Legette as a starter, Jonathan Brooks as a starter, and Jadavian Sanders as a starter by the end of the year. Heck, I'll even go as far as saying maybe even Trevin Wallace potentially starting at some point, considering if there's potential injuries or stuff happens, Now, but real quick, with Wallace.
Real quick, since you bring it up, because we're about 15 minutes away from kickoff. So I do want to end this at about 10 minutes to give 5 minutes for everybody to get their set up, get another fresh cold beer. Jared, I know you want to make sure that your laptop is set up for the college game and the TV is perfect. You got the angles. I want you to have time to succeed too here. But you bring up the name, and he is active today. Xavier Legette. That is somebody that I think that I am pretty interested in seeing what he looks like out there today. I'm not expecting huge usage or anything like that. Like, again, man, they're not going to just like run these guys into the ground because they're active today. But I want to see what they do as far as motioning him and what kind of packages they put him in with the rest of the personnel around him. We talk about that 12 personnel. One thing I think is really interesting about what they do with that 12 is that they're motioning the tight ends a lot too. You know what I mean? Like, they're bringing guys around. They're changing the strong sides. They're doing some things that I know they said they're going to keep it vanilla to an extent or expect a vanilla approach today. And shout out JJ Hardy for Panthers culture. And he said, hey, that Mexican vanilla, though, might be the one, right? So there is a different level. Like, we're not getting that big tub of the yellow tint vanilla that we had the entire season last year in Carolina. We might be getting the fresh Madagascar beans. We might be getting the Tahitian, bean vanilla ice cream. We might be getting the Mexican vanilla that's got that little hint of something to it. So what I have seen from a conceptual standpoint and a schematic standpoint with Canales so far, it is vanilla. Like, they've had Jack Plummer running the damn offense. Like, you can't ask him to do a bunch of crazy stuff. But so I'm not worried about it being vanilla. If Bryce could come out and execute it with what we have seen, it's going to look better than what we saw in the regular season last year. Do you have any concern about that vanilla term being thrown around again?
No. I mean, just based on what I've seen in practice.
Yeah.
Last year, of course, we all know it was a complete shit show. So we're not
there, right?
I get there's PTSD with the word vanilla
doubt.
among Panther fans, and trust me, I cringe at it anytime I hear about it. But this vanilla is different from last year's vanilla, like you were talking about. There's a lot more to this offense than there was last year. We're seeing flashes of it. Like I said, I was saying earlier, you're seeing motions, you're seeing jet sweeps, you're seeing screens, you're seeing mid receiver screens, you're seeing all these different types of
slip screens. Those slip screens are something that I think Canales really enjoys, and I think that's where Jatavian can really make some hay too.
Right, exactly. And you're seeing all this like eye candy stuff. That's what was missing big time from last year. I think that's what Bryce Young should have had last year as starting quarterback, was an offense that created a lot of eye candy, a lot of moving parts. You're going to see
a lot of misdirection and creating openings. Yeah, absolutely.
And that is going to be something we'll see flashes of that today, whether it's first team, second team, third team, whatever. But you're going to see more of that as the season goes along. What Dave Canales has done is work with the player strengths, work with what you have personnel-wise, and work with their strengths. And he did that last year. They did not run a lot of motion last year with Tampa Bay, but that's because he was working with what worked well with Baker Mayfield. Sometimes Baker Mayfield, he doesn't need to have that eye candy so he can see the field better,
And they still did run it at a higher clip than the Panthers, right? Like, I think that they ran at about 26%, I believe was the mark that I remember for the Buccaneers, and I think that the Panthers were sub 20. So there was at least a little bit extra there. Real quick, now we got 5 minutes, so let's do a real tight wrap up here. I want to touch on defense just for a second, though, man. And one player that I want to talk about is the newly acquired Michael Jackson. I didn't see him on the inactive list, but also I don't know, has he passed a physical? Is that transaction completely done? Is he able to play today? Do you anticipate him playing today? What is the situation surrounding Michael Jackson?
I'm more just guessing here. I'm more in the same boat you are. Don't really have enough information on that right now. But what I am assuming is that he has already passed his physical. And if he's already, I mean, I could probably check the timeline real quick to even see if he's.
And he wasn't officially on the inactive list, and that's what I thought was interesting. Because if he has passed his physical, that also means that he's got the green light that if they want to see him thrown out there, maybe he doesn't go out there with the first team defense, right? Maybe they do throw him out there a little bit later in the game just to get him a little bit familiar with scheme and getting that playing speed going here in Carolina. But I do think that he's a player, and I'd love your quick take on that trade. I think he's a player that can come in and really bridge that gap between that Dane Jackson injury and forcing a guy like Deshaun Jameson, who has played well, or a guy like DiCaprio Bootle, who has done enough, in my opinion, to make the roster and be good depth, but not forcing them to take on a role that they may not be 100% ready for.
Right. And Michael, in the addition of Michael Jackson, I mean, we're having all these sorts of Jacksons on this team. Michael Jackson, there were so many, like Michael Jackson, the singer jokes and all that. Like, I mean, I'm like, come on, man. But anyways,
shout out to Dunk though, because he crushed his segment with that, man. That was absolutely terrific.
He killed it. I'm like, bro, you're a fool for that. But
it was great. Honestly, man, like, and it was a pretty short thing. I mean, it was a kind of pretty young thing as far as the segment goes, but it was pretty damn good.
Yeah. And so back to Michael Jackson, like I'm going to just call him Mike Jackson, so then it's not
There you go.
confusing for some. Mike Jackson is an upgrade of sorts for just that cornerback room, but not per se like he's better than Dane Jackson. I think he's about on the same level, maybe slightly better. But at the same time, Panthers have better depth than they did a week ago, which is crucial. So as long as you have better depth on the perimeter, that's huge for this defense, especially with Dane Jackson out for probably a couple more weeks. He might miss the first game or two of the season with that. I believe it's a hamstring injury. So that's basically where we're at right now.
Yeah. So look, we got 9 minutes, man. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap this up. But Jared, I've got a question for you. I know that you're going to be paying really close attention come Tuesday for that big cut down from 90 to 53. I'm sure you're going to have some content coming out. If I get the gumption up to do another live here in the next week, love to have you back on, man. And we could do this again and talk about some of these moves that happen.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down.
Awesome. All right, look, enjoy the game. Enjoy the college football today. I appreciate you coming on, bro. Congratulations again on what you got going on, man. I'm super stoked for you. And by the way, Jared, when he left Cat Crave, he left a mailbag-sized hole in it. I have taken over that mailbag sized hole. So if you appreciated me and Jared's conversation here today and our perspectives, shoot me questions, man. If I didn't get to something that you want, shoot me questions. I'll answer them in Cat Crave. We'll get them out there. Watch the game today. If something strikes your eye and you want to know a little bit more about it, holler at me. Jared, enjoy everything today, man. And I'll holler at you soon.
All righty. Sounds good.
All right, everybody, enjoy the Carolina Panthers preseason game today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Remember, it's preseason. If Bryce Young doesn't do the greatest things in the world, it's preseason. If he does the greatest things in the world, it means everything, and we're going to the Super Bowl. Don't let anybody diminish your joy. I'm ready to celebrate today. Have a great time. Keep pounding.